Have you got the right tyres on your adventure bike? Well, if they're black and round, that's probably a good start. But there's more to it than that. So we've put together a little guide with the help of Bridgestone to choosing the right adventure tyre for not just your adventure bike, but the type of riding you're doing. Look at this place. It's beautiful. The moody mountains of northern Portugal. And we're on a Bridgestone tyre launch. So we have got 3 different types of Bridgestone tyre to try. Got the A41, which is the fully road-going adventure bike tyre. We've got the AT41 that I'm riding now, which is the 80-20 bias towards tarmac. And then later on today, we've got the 50-50 tyre, the AX41. I'm gonna ride them in a bunch of different environments. Bit of cold, wet riding this morning, some gravel. Now Bridgestone invited us out to, well, one of my favourite places, Portugal. It's one of the best places to ride off-road and on-road on big bikes in the whole of Europe. I challenge you to prove me wrong and I'll be happy to go out somewhere else and find out. But the point is, Portugal gives us a great proving ground to ride fast, twisty mountain roads, good tarmac, bad tarmac, and then a massive variety of off-road trails. So here we bought 3 versions of the Bridgestone Adventure tyre and put them to the test on all kinds of terrain to see what one works best in what situation and what will be best for your type of riding. And adventure bikes are all about getting the most out of any situation. That's the whole point with an adventure bike, and tyres kind of, for me, have to do the same thing. There's nothing worse than being on an amazing, perfect road on a full-on gnarly off-road tyre and not being able to enjoy it. And likewise, there's nothing worse than finding an amazing track you want to ride down, but your tyre's not capable of giving you any sort of feel or grip on the track, so you don't enjoy it. You need to try and pick a tyre that covers all of your riding situations, and that's the personal thing with tyres. You need to be very honest about what you want out of your adventure bike, what you want out of your bike, and pick the tyre that suits the majority of situations. Now, when you're choosing a tyre for your adventure bike, there are 3 things you've got to consider first. Number 1 is use. What sort of terrain are you going to ride on? Are you going to ride all on off-road? Are you going to ride all on on-road? Are you going to ride a bit of a mix of both? Or do you mainly ride on-road, but you aspire to have a play on the trails? Number 2 is mileage. An off-road orientated adventure tyre is not going to do the same number of miles as a full road spec tyre. So if you are going to get really wound up that your tyres only returned 3,000, 2,000 miles, then look away from the knobbly stuff and head back towards more road biased tyre. Third, and you're probably all going to laugh at me for this one, it's looks. We have to be honest, an adventure bike on a big gnarly set of knobblies like the AX41, it just looks right. It looks so much cooler. And if you're prepared to accept the compromises that those knobbly tyres give you on the tarmac, there's nothing wrong with fitting the coolest looking tyre you can for posing outside Starbucks. Just throw a bit of mud on your bike so at least you look slightly genuine. One thing the Bridgestone engineers were discussing with us yesterday was the kind of roll and slight confusion that gets caused by an OE spec tyre. So what I mean by an OE spec tyre is a tyre that comes on your bike as standard. Very often the manufacturers, the motorcycle manufacturers, dictate a particular set of parameters they want the original equipment tyre to perform to get through their sign-off tests, to meet the manufacturer's requirements. So if you buy, for example, a Bridgestone AX41 from your BMW shop as an OE spec tyre for your 1250 GS, it will have a different set of characteristics to an AX41 that you buy from a tyre supplier just as a generic AX41. And those differences can be quite pronounced. So, for example, a manufacturer might want emphasis on straight line stability. They might want an emphasis on mileage. In sports bike world, quite often the manufacturers want the tyres to be light so that the bike has a lighter tyre, but obviously that reduces how much mileage you get out of it. So it's important to note when you're riding a bike on the tyres it came from as standard. If you ride a brand new bike on the original tyres, if you don't like those tyres on that bike when you buy it, that doesn't necessarily mean that you wouldn't like the aftermarket version of the same tyre, which is very confusing. There's usually like a letter denoting that it's a OE specific tyre rather than the aftermarket one. But it's worth knowing that, and worth considering when you replace the tyres what you're after. If you're after it feeling exactly the same as it has since it was brand new, then buy the OE spec one. But generally, if you're after a more rounded performance from the tyre, so it doesn't excel in one area and lose in others, but actually works better in all areas, at that point it's worth getting the aftermarket tyre. It's a little bit confusing and a little bit irritating that they come with the same name, but now you know.
Now, on top of those considerations, moving from the most road biased tyre here, which is the A41, through the AT41 onto the AX41, you have to move around a few different parameters in terms of dry grip, wet grip, vibration, noise, and confidence. So starting with the A41, that is a 90% road tyre, 10% off-road. And what does that actually mean? Well, in truth, if you put this tyre on your bike, your road performance is excellent, and in particular, this thing works really well on a wet road. Now, if you want to go riding off-road, here in the south of Europe, where it's sunny, it's quite often dry, that tyre will do a lot off-road, a lot more than most people think. Where it starts to struggle is when you get looser gravel surfaces, where it's a hard packed underneath with a loose layer of gravel on top. And obviously, as soon as it gets muddy, that tyre turns into a slick and you're in a world of pain. Now, if you're looking to off-road ride in the UK, they're going to make your life hard work. But if you're looking to take on the occasional light gravel track in the south of Europe, that tyre is going to do the job fantastically. Now, I'm going to skip straight to the other end of the spectrum now and talk about the AX41, which is a 50-50 tyre, 50 off-road, 50 road. Now, what are our compromises when we're talking about that? Well, off-road versus any of these, there's no compromise. But off-road, they give you excellent grip, excellent confidence, and that ability to ride your all-terrain adventure bike in all-terrain places. You won't run out of grip really before you run out of bike, as a general rule. If we're talking extreme stuff like souped-up Yamaha Teneres and KTM rallies, then for sure an enduro tyre can take you that next step. But for adventure riding, that is taking your bike 2 places, regardless of the speed, that tyre is kind of all you need. The payback obviously comes when you're back on the tarmac. But don't rule that tyre out. You'll be absolutely blown away how fast you can ride on those knobbies. And that's because this is an adventure tyre. 50% of the development, remember, has been about tarmac riding. They've moved the block spacing, they've tapered the edges, and they've made a tyre that you can drag foot pegs, you can carry massive lean angle, and you'll be surprised how much fun you can have on it. Where's the limit? Well, the 2 things you'll find. 1, absolute edge grip. When you're on the edge of the tyre, if you're aggressive with the throttle, you will find that starts to slide around. If you ask me, that's the best thing on earth. Being able to power slide a bike on tarmac makes you, well, basically Casey Stoner in your own mind. So I love that about it, but it's something you need to be aware of. Second, wet weather performance. On a wet road, they do really well for a 50-50 tyre, but that's where you notice the biggest deficit when riding on the road versus the other 2 tyres. That little bit of confidence on the edge of the tyre, as you roll off the centre knobbles onto the edge one, just loses a little bit of feel, and on slippery, greasy roads, that's where you notice the drawback. And right here in the middle, we have got the AT41. Now, is it as good as the AT41 off-road? Definitely not. I'd say off-road performance sits slightly closer to the A41. Bridgestone list it as a 80-20 tyre with 80% bias being on the road. Versus the A41, you actually get slightly better wet weather performance because of the block pattern clearing the water away from the treads more. To be honest, riding on the road here on a variety of tarmac surfaces, I didn't feel a huge difference between the A41 and the AT41 in terms of grip, in terms of feel. They both felt a very similar tyre to me. And again, versus the AX41, you get a lot more mileage. Right, who's still with me? Is anyone actually out there still awake? Or have you moved the video and just watched all the videos of the skids? I don't blame you. Tyre talk is something that some people love and some people find the most boring thing on the planet. I always take the mickey out of my dad at this point, but my dad will literally ride any tyre on the bike as long as it's got enough air to keep the rim off the floor. And then when I put some brand new fancy pants tyres on his bike and set the pressures correctly, guess what? He doesn't notice. So depending on what sort of person you are, you might not give a damn about any of this. But if you're someone who likes to fiddle around with tyres and understand it, I hope that's given you a bit more of a insight into the different styles of tyre. What tyre should you put on your bike? Well, go back to those first 3 parameters I talked about. How much off-road are you actually going to do? Let that drive the decision first as to which one of these 3 you're going to go for. Secondly, what mileage are you prepared to put up with? If you want a tyre to last 8,000 miles, you need to be down this end of the pile. And finally, looks. Don't let anyone tell you you can't fit a tyre just because it looks cool. If you think that tyre is going to make your bike look cooler and it's going to make you happier, sling a set on and go be a hero at every bike meet. Right, that's enough tyre talk now. If you want to talk more about tyres, turn up to any adventure bike meetup anywhere and mention tyre choice, and you'll have a group of people around you chewing your ear off with all of their facts and opinions. Me, I like whatever's fitted to the bike, so I can do as many skids and burnouts and wheelies until it's time for a new set. I think that's the best philosophy. Get out there, do some skids and enjoy your tyres.